The Sprint Planner simplifies the sprint planning process by automating capacity planning, allowing teams to plan their sprint backlog against the capacity budget, and automating the creation of the sprint and related subtasks in Jira. Here are some of the high-level features and capabilities. It allows you to quickly account for all the team members allocated and free time for things such as sprint ceremonies, meetings, paid time off, and support. It also allows you to allocate a percentage of the team's time for things like tech debt, administration, and risks. It provides 4 separate holiday schedules to account for different types of employees and contractors who may have differing holidays. The Sprint Plan allows teams to select stories and other issue types from their Jira backlog, break those issues down into subtasks if desired, and estimate the time for each. The remaining sprint capacity hours and percent are decremented automatically as issues or subtasks are estimated. The planner allows you to automatically create the sprint in Jira along with any created subtasks and their associated effort estimate. And the planner can also work standalone without Jira.
Okay, this is the Sprint Planner. What I'm going to do is first take you a high-level description of each of the tabs and what they do, and then we'll come back and go through them and how they work in detail and do some examples. So the capacity planning tab is where you set up all the information necessary for the tool to figure out how many hours are available for the team members to work on the work that you identify. The sprint plan is where you identify the work that the work for your sprint plan. You'll identify each of the issues and then estimate how many hours it's going to take to complete them. The holidays tab is where you set the different holidays for your team members. There's 4 different schedules to accommodate potentially different schedules for different team members. For instance, you may have full-time team members with one holiday schedule, and then contractors with another holiday schedule, and then maybe multiple contractors. So you can have up to 4 different holiday schedules that you can use. And then the configurations are where you basically just set the configurations for your Jira instance, what project you're working on, and the board ID that it's going to be using for the sprint planning. Okay, so let's go through the sprint planning tab. All right, so let's go back to the capacity planning sheet. All right, the capacity planning sheet consists of 3 sections. The first section is your sprint information, so your sprint name and your sprint dates. The second is the your sprint meetings or sprint ceremonies. And then the third is the team member section where you'll configure all the information for each team member so it can calculate their available hours. Okay, let's go through and do an example because I think that'll be the best way to understand how this is working. So I'm going to give it a sprint name of example sprint. I'll have the sprint start on 2/8/21. My end date is automatically calculated for me. It just adds on 13 days to the start date. For your Scrum meetings / Scrum ceremonies, there are 5 different ceremonies. You have elaboration / grooming, sprint planning, your daily Scrum, your retro, and your review. So you're going to give it the number of hours for each ceremony and the frequency of that ceremony throughout the sprint. So in this case, we're doing grooming and elaboration 4 times at an hour and a half pop. Sprint planning is an hour and a half once for the sprint. The daily Scrum is 15 minutes per day. We're doing 9 stand-ups. And it's pulling that 9 down here from the sprint working days. I'll get to that in a second. And then the retro is an hour, and the review is an hour. So the sprint working days is calculated based on calculating the number of net working days between these 2 dates. If you look at the formula, it's just the Google Sheets net work days. So it's obviously taking out all the weekends, and then it's using the first schedule and the holidays schedule to determine any holidays that it needs to take out of that number as well. And I'll come back to the schedule, holiday schedules in a minute. The effective hours per day, those are the number of basically raw available hours per team member. So you're going to exclude time that you think people are going to take for coffee breaks and whatever. Obviously, it's a generic number. You're not trying to figure that on a per person basis. So the team member information is where we're going to enter the necessary information for the tool to figure out how many hours are available for each team member in this sprint. So the first column is the holiday schedule. There are 4 different schedules available. If we go back and look, or if we go and look at the holiday schedule, this allows you to set up different holiday schedules for different team member, or maybe team member types. So for instance, maybe you've got a combination of full-time employees and then some contractors, and the full-time employees have different holiday schedules than the contractors. So you might even have multiple contracting firms you're working with. They could have different schedules. So you can have up to 4 different schedules that you can enter here. And so when you select the drop-down, it will then use that schedule to determine any schedule that needs to take out of their available hours for that particular sprint. The gross availability is the team member's allocation to your team. So, for instance, if you have a team member that's 100% full time on your team, then that's going to be 100%. If they're half time, it's 50%. So this is their basically gross allocation to the team, not the percentage of time they're necessarily available for this sprint. That's what this whole thing is doing. So that then calculates the hours per day, basically taking the gross availability times the hours per day to figure out their particular gross availability per day. You then add in any personal days that they're going to be taking during this sprint. All right, that will give you the gross available hours total. It will then subtract out the gross meetings, the scrum meetings from that number. And then you can add in any other, you can add in hours for any other meetings that they might have beyond these scrum meetings up here. So for instance, maybe team members working on a separate committee or something where they've got meetings separate from your team. You would enter those here. And then on support, this allows you basically to just take the team member out of your sprint capacity altogether. So if they're on support for that particular sprint, if you click on that, it will remove them from the sprint capacity altogether. If you see, I click it back on, you see their hours come back in. Right? Up here, these are your overall team allocations. So you can allocate a percentage of the team's time for certain things. Now I've got tech debt, administrative hours, whatever. You can call these whatever you want. All it's doing is basically taking a percentage of the team's time and allocating it on a per team member basis. So if I were to change this, say, from 5% to 10%, you see the numbers here double for each team member. So this allows you to allocate a certain amount of the team's time for some type of work that you want allocated across the board. And then it will then calculate the net available hours for that team member and their net available percentage. Okay. All right. So you're going to do that for each team member, and then it will calculate the total number of hours available for the team for that sprint. If you want to add a new team member, let's say team member 9, it will automatically fill in all these other items here automatically. So you don't have to worry about copying and pasting any of these rows down here. Just leave everything as. The only things you want to fill in are the ones in white. The ones that are in green, those are formulas, so you shouldn't touch those. All right. So once you've gone through and done that for each of your team members, you then have total number of hours for this sprint. What I think you'll find is once you've filled this in for the first time, you won't have to change a tremendous amount about this. For instance, you won't be changing this column a lot. Pretty much the only thing you're going to change much at all are going to be the personal days and sometimes other meetings available for that team member. So this becomes a very, very quick and easy exercise to go through and complete. Okay, so now I have my capacity done. Now I can create my sprint plan. So I'm going to click on the Sprint Plan tab. And you see that the sprint capacity hours, that's the same number of hours that were calculated down here. And then you have the planned hours that it will basically sum this up as I'm adding in items to my plan. It will show me the number of hours that are being planned. It will then subtract that from the total capacity hours to show me the remaining number of hours and the remaining percentage. So I can see as I'm going along how much capacity I have left. So what I'm going to be doing is basically along here I'm going to be selecting from my JIRA backlog the particular items that I want to put into this sprint plan. So if I click on this, these are all the items that are currently in my backlog that have not been started or completed, or they could have been started but they haven't been in the sprint. So I'll select that first one, Planner Demo Story, and where these come from. If you come up here in the menu and you click Refresh Available Issues, it will pull down all the issues from your Jira backlog, and that's how that list gets populated. So I've selected Sprint Planner Demo 1 story. In this case, I'm going to keep it very simple. I'm not going to break that down into subtasks, and I'll just give it an estimate of 40 hours. So it put 40 down here, subtracted 40 from the 212, so I have 172 hours remaining. Let's do a second one. So come down here, I'll select Demo Story 2. For this one, I'm going to create subtasks for it. So from here, these are the subtask types that are available. In this case, there's only one subtask type, subtask. I'll call it subtask 1. And I'm going to say it's going to be 25 hours. And let's do a second one. 2. Oops. And we'll say that's going to be 15. So I've got another 40. So a total of 80 hours, 132, 60, or 62%. So it's showing me as I'm going along, adding items in, how much capacity I have remaining in my sprint plan. Okay, so once I've added in all my issues, I then have the option of actually having it create the sprint for me. So if I come up here and I say create sprint, what it will do is it will take the information from here in the capacity planning tool. So it will give it the sprint name. We'll use these dates as input into the sprint, and it will add in all these issues to the sprint as well as create these subtasks for me. So let's do that. Create sprint. Okay, let's go and check Jira now, and oops, projects. If I look at my backlog, you see there's my sprint example sprint. So it doesn't start the sprint for you. You still have, you'll still do that, but it's created the sprint for me. It's added the two issues in that I planned. And if I click on that, you see the two subtasks I created, subtask 1, subtask 2, have been created for me. So it should save you. I mean, that's a lot of grunt work when you're going through and having to create all those subtasks. It will save you the headache of doing that and create the sprint for you. All you have to do is then hit start to get going. All right, so that is pretty much it. Okay, so that wraps up all the demos. Again, all these tools can be found if you go to home.agilecreatives.net and then you go to the tools page. You'll find all these tools available for download. So check them out. I hope they help. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, michael.bumensor@agilecreatives.net. Happy to help you out. Thanks.